Hello again, I am Blunty, and just a scrape under 6 weeks back I put the so-called technical alpha for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 through its paces on the ROG Ally. Mostly out of curiosity, as practically speaking it was only a vague guide towards how the final product would perform because it was feature incomplete and it was limited in several ways. Well, yesterday was launch day for the allegedly full product, and if you're on this video, I'd say chances are decent you know how that went, and why I'm using the word allegedly full product. As of this morning though, 26 hours after launch as I record these words, the server situation at least seems to have solidified, and now I'm having no trouble at all loading it up and loading into flights, and having various aircraft all load in properly, something that could not be said for my evening's attempts last night. So, that's a start on fixing the cargo hold full of issues that this title launched with. I'd make a joke about being over luggage weight limits or something, but I think that would belabor the metaphor. It does at least make performance testing properly viable now, and with the ROG Ally aligning pretty nicely with what most would call a decent, if lower-end gaming PC these days, with a modern AMD architecture CPU carrying 8 cores and 16 threads, and a ray tracing-capable AMD RDNA 3-based GPU, roughly in the overall performance ballpark of a GTX 1650. It makes a pretty useful low-end gaming testbed, plus it shares the basic hardware specs with several of the higher-profile PC gaming handhelds out there, like MSI's Claw and Lenovo's Legion Go. So, as you can see, much like my original testing with the technical alpha, it is surprisingly not hard to get a decently reliable performance target and a very playable situation going on here. And I'll get to settings and frame rates in a moment, but we've got to start at the start. Starting at the start, startup time doesn't suffer too much for the low-end equipment here, loading up from cold and freshly installed in a little over 4.5 minutes. Not unusual for this title. Second consideration was the clarity of the instruments. It's vital to be able to easily read at a glance several important displays and controls and gauges. Not that I expect many people running on handhelds especially to be in serious flight sim mode rather than happy fun chill times mode, but it's still important, so visual clarity of these is a priority. Now, when it comes to frame rate, Flight Sim is a bit different to most games I test in that a lot more of the player base is happier to accept what most gamers would call low frame rates. For me, this title needs 30 FPS as a target. 60 FPS or higher will let the world slide by more smoothly and no doubt looks more pleasant overall, but it in no practical way actually makes engaging with the sim any better. In fact, dips to the 20s aren't even the huge issue that many games would suffer under, just because of the nature of the beast here. But just for visual pleasantness and overall feeling of things like moving the camera in the cockpit view, I targeted 30 FPS. With all that set up, we'll start at basic low-end presets, 720p and the default TAA anti-aliasing. This is where I had the Tech Alpha sitting, and it's fine. The small 7-inch 1080p screen on the ROG Ally does, as I always say, hide a lot of the crimes of running so low. But if you're on a low-end desktop rig with similar specs, with a 24-inch or bigger 1080p screen, as you're likely to do matched up with that, it's not ideal. So, let's try 1080p and hop up to the more efficient FSR2 scaling in balanced mode. And it holds up okay. I've known flight simmers who are perfectly fine with relatively frequent dips into the high 20s, but I already know if I'm getting that in the air, like I'm here, things like airports and large cities will be a larger problem. The readouts, the UI, the controls all look nice and crisp though, so if you are okay with those particularly low frame rates, this is a nice place to be, but as is so often the case for the Ally, I found my sweet spot at 900p. It delivers a noticeable boost in clarity for the UI and instruments over 720p, it chokes off the worst of the jaggies and softness, and saves just enough headroom for a very satisfying performance target. Now then, let's tune our power. These tests so far are all in the high power mode, the so-called 30-watt turbo mode. If you're on a low-end desktop, you're fine. But if you're on a laptop or a handheld, you might want to adjust your power settings for a couple of reasons. Fan noise is a high priority control issue for me, and also heat in general, because, I'm holding the thing. But also, as Flight Sim is one of those titles that you can potentially easily sink into for an extended period of time, there's also battery life to worry about if you're running untethered. For me, if I'm on battery, it's for short bursts while I'm traveling and whatnot. More often than not, with the ROG Ally, I'm at home with it, just curled up in a bed or something more comfortable than my desk, where I would usually play PC games. Point is, staying hooked up to power is easy for me. But there's still fans and heat to worry about. So, popping down to a custom 18-watt power mode, something extremely popular with the users of these devices have set up, because it's a really nice sweet spot between performance and heat. There's a slight performance drop as you'd expect, but we're still in a very playable spot, and the fan noise did drop down noticeably too. The 10-watt silent mode was, rather expectedly, not what you would call pleasant, but hey, we got to test it. It'd be silly not to give it a go, eh? Finally, the stock 15-watt performance mode, something I rarely use these days, honestly, because the 18-watt mode that the community sort of came up with usually offers up a noticeable boost without too much compromise on heat and fans, which is why a custom 18-watt mode is so popular. However, for Flight Sim and its inherent tolerability to occasional dips into the 20s, this is what I call the sweet spot for balancing power and heat and performance and visual clarity. So we're looking at 900p, low-end preset, FSR2 and 15-watt performance mode. Now, of course, in the lowest graphics presets, you won't be seeing all the fancy new ground cover and massively boosted detail and geometry and whatnot, but, it still looks fine. Not much good for photo mode, obviously, but in general, we're in a very playable space overall. You'll chug a bit here and there, but for 90% of the time of my testing so far, you'll be at 30 FPS or better, nice, clean, easily readable UI, and a responsive feeling experience. Not bad. For all the issues MSFS 2024 is suffering at launch, you still have to give them props for how scalable this beastie is, especially considering how sophisticated the sim is under the hood, with all kinds of physics simulations and whatnot going on, and the entire planet of Earth to digitally double. It is impressive, which only makes the launch disasters even more worse and frustrating, I guess. Oh well, we are settling out to cruising altitude now. We'll have to wait and see how quickly the repair work can get done while we travel in the air, I suppose. Good luck, Asobo and Microsoft. Hopefully you get it all fixed quickly so people can stop whining and start enjoying, because, who enjoys whining about this? We all want to have fun with it. That's why we're whining, because all the shit is broken. We want our stuff to be good, so just make it good and leave us alone. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty. Thank you to the patrons, and I will catch you next time.
Gears up for water landing. 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 Gears up for water landing.